Kamohelo Blessing Rooi is a South African artist working and living in Soweto. All his works are about celebrating black people and the landscape around him. He believes the appreciation of simple life, calmness, and everything that brings joy and happiness.
My name is Kamohelo Blessing Rooi. I'm born and raised in South Africa, currently living and working in Soweto. So my environment started to influence my practice around last year. So I started to document my environment, um, the people, and the landscape, for the world, to see us in a different manner, in a different light, in a positive manner. I mean, my work aims to celebrate Black people, and to celebrate the simplicity of life, So having to be associated with my environment and my inspiration, it's natural, it's organic, I don't have to travel, miles to get inspiration. My inspiration surrounds me.
I know that you used casual and soft pastas before. And why did you like them, and why did you decide to change to acrylic later?
The works of Nelson Makamu, an artist who used charcoal oils printmaking to celebrate, his village and the South African children. And so I was so influenced and inspired by his works. So I started to use dry mediums, trying to discover my painting and my drawing skills. So my technique was, rather than having to capture myself, having to express myself. When years, went by, I saw that my language, is kind of not, quite good in art, because I was trying to do someone's stuff in my own style. So I started to transition and started to embark on a journey of trying to find my own voice. That's when I started to use acrylic paints. I have so many ideas, running in my head. So acrylic mediums give me the opportunity to express those ideas freely and spontaneously.
What I really like in your paintings that you use flat brush strokes and flat layers. How you can play between 2 and 3 dimensions.
Well, having to use negative space. Negative space mainly applies, having to do a flat brush strokes using maybe one color, and on the other hand, you will see something that is very detailed, having to see maybe something very recognizable, having to combine those elements feels contemporary. So I try to, not to, be realistic, but rather I try to celebrate color. So having to use flat brushstrokes for me, helps me to actually capture the vibrancy of our culture, of our heritage as Black people. Yeah, it's like having to use flat brushstrokes and bright colors is a way for me, to appreciate, the landscape.
I'd like you to answer that how your personal aspects can be seen globally.
Art, it's a very spiritual thing, because when I am painting, I am actually dealing with myself. I am actually being vulnerable, And what is very great about art is that it tries to capture, the human experience. these experiences are not black and white. They are human experiences, you know. Art doesn't have boundaries. It's a human thing. It's a human experience. So from centuries, it was used to capture how we live and to appreciate life. So I'm trying to do that, you know, by reflecting to our times.
If I say black joy, what um, come to into your mind?
African art, you know, for me, it has to deal with representation. For the longest time, you know, we experience a lack of representation, you know, of African art. African art was, you know, not taken into consideration or appreciated as art of value. If you can watch the news, all you hear on the news is black trauma, you know. It's like these things, they can affect your life negatively, you know. You start to feel unsafe, you know, you start to not appreciate life. But if we can start to appreciate life, by appreciating who we are first and having to learn who we are and appreciate, you know, who we are and where we come from and where we are going. So I try to celebrate Black people who have not been seen in industries of fashion, music, you know. So it's Black Joy because now we are celebrating things that we thought we would never reach, you know. So my work cannot serve the past. I cannot, you know,
Focus on
document, you know, the
blackart.com.
hardships, the struggles of Black people. But in fact, I'm trying to bring the positive things, you know, or someone who feels empowered and beautiful in their own skin, in their own identity, in their own ways. I will capture that, you know.
How can you show the importance of resilience in your work?
That's so important. Having to be resilient is having to believe, you know, in what you are doing, in what you are producing. It has to deal with being consistent, you know, and having to work, you know, hard. So being resilient means, you know, even though you face hardships, you still have to believe in what you are doing and do it, you know, no matter what, man, no matter, you know, the cost, you have to believe and do it. I think that's so important, you know, and also having to remind myself of the African calendar, you know, of 4 seasons. We have summer, you know, which it's a metaphor to me, you know. Summer, it's bright, it's sunny, it's warm, you know, flowers are beautiful, you know, the grass is green, you know, you experience a good harvest in plants. We have fruits, veggies, you know, and stuff like that. And in art, there are times whereby, you know, you meet those sales, and we experience, you know, winter, where things, they kind of like break, you know, where crops don't grow, where things are bitter. So we do also experience those, you know, experts in art, you know, having to experience those difficulties. But what is so important about it is that is being resilient, you know, having to fight and push, you know, those boundaries of having to go through hardship and come out with something. And I love it, man. I don't want a perfect life. I don't want a perfect, you know, nation. The way we live our life, the imperfections, and how we move.
I really love that you celebrate everyday life in your works, and I see that you use a lot of things in your works, like cars, clothes, flowers, everyday objects. And what do these
Yeah.
symbolize in your works?
So it's like life on its own, it's beautiful, man. Life is beautiful. Having to celebrate a car, a picture of a car, a picture of a clothing or a model dressed in this beautiful, clothing. It's so empowering to me. Why do I say so? It's because, those things come from the ground, come from Mother Nature. So also those things, they intend to harm our world, because those things are materials. So having to do those things, it's a reminder, but subconsciously so. When you look at the picture, you may appreciate its beauty, its technique, and its storytelling, but it's way deeper than that. It's having to appreciate the sacrifice, the resilience, the consistency, the vision, the purpose, the aligning, the spiritual aspect of that, because it's a way of showing that we as human beings, we are very capable of anything.
Want to ask about the black figure in your paintings. How do you compose the black figure in the landscape?
So having to place my paintings in a manner that, champions Black people in their own environment, it's a sense of ownership, even though we don't own the land, but it shows that you belong somewhere, and where you belong, you have to appreciate it and to take care of it. So having to start a painting, I start by, doing some editing through my phone, So by doing so, it's kind of like having to paint, but not using traditional mediums
FocusOnBlackArt.com.
such as acrylic or a brush or a canvas, but I kind of like you use that on my phone, firstly. So I kind of like check how will this art be, on the final product when it's finished.
The arts and craft movement also inspired you.
It's like mainly, so I'm a self-taught artist, so I had this huge desire. Even now, I still have high hopes of going to an art school, mainly. I just want to learn about printmaking, lithography, all those techniques, so that they can help my visual language to expand it and, to use different types of techniques. So having to attend arts and craft, classes helped me, to appreciate the aspect of doing things on your own and being responsible for those things, So I was mainly gifted using my hands, So I felt very celebrated and appreciated when I work with my hands, those elements, because it's like why I use collage in my paintings. It's like photography. Photography is mainly having to use your camera, and in a second, you just capture a moment, and it stays there, it becomes a permanent thing. So having to use my camera to capture something and to print out image, I would then use that image onto my canvas is like the contemporary culture of making art, and having to infuse collage and painting and combine those two aspects on a single canvas, So I'm still having to gamble on that.
Some of your paintings has like a mosaic style or different fragments next to each other. It
Yes.
reminds me of comics because as I see, for me, it's telling a story, a whole story in one painting.
Love that you touched upon having, to see that my art has this element of animation. Having to be inspired by that also helped me to understand my paintings, in a way that I just want to become a storyteller, So by doing so, I use collage painting. So when I use collage painting, it grants me this freedom of having to celebrate life, by extending the story or the event of that particular, moment. I just want the works to have their own voice and their own presence, even though I'm not there physically.
Yes, I understand, and I think I also want to talk about a bit about your colors. You use very rich and vibrant tones, and also colors that are very close to the ground, close to the nature.
It's mainly about life, man. It's mainly about life, appreciation, and to show who we are as human beings, how vulnerable and how sensitive we are. As the man is singular, but is so associated around his environment and is so surrounded by nature. You see roses, you see a plum tree that is still growing, indeed time flies, and that environment will soon change, and the changing of that environment will also be the responsibility of a human being. If you take good care of that environment, the grass will become greener and the plants will grow.
Focus on
as a reward. So
blackart.com.
my duty as an artist is to appreciate, what I have now and having to realize that I have the power and the influence to change my environment and to make it a better place for the next generation to build upon it.
That your paintings are also about the past, the present, and the future as well. How are you connected to time?
My past helps me to appreciate what I have now, and what I have now will eventually determine my tomorrow, you know. A seed, it's a very small thing. It's a grain. It's very small, but it's very powerful, That's how a talent is, So it's inside of you. It's like a baby, and you have to protect that. So something from my past is like, man, it's like we came into this earth without knowing that this is earth, but we were educated, and given this knowledge that this is earth, and we should live in this way in order for us to continue to enjoy the benefits
Focus on
of living on
blackart.com.
planet Earth. So it's like planting a seed, and doing your duty of making sure that the seed that you have planted grows, to wait for the right time for you to harvest,
A special composition that is on the process.
Yes, I have a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the work, I felt like the work was too heavy for me. So I decided to roll the work and put it away so that I can refresh and start again. But I will soon work upon that work. So that work, it's mainly about celebrating love, in a form
Oh.
of marriage. Yeah. So that's why I say in my work, I play around this idea of nostalgia, and I use my own photo book, having to check my family photo books, what they did in the past and how they celebrated life, So I came across these images whereby, you know, there were beautiful couples in a marriage and there were people, dressed in their beautiful clothing, doing their, wedding dance, and so I'm trying to capture something from my past and try to use what is present to kind of like combine those two elements and use them in my advantage. So on that piece, on the left side, you see people, dancing, a group of people dancing in a wedding. And on the right side, you'll see this gentleman in a very beautiful, ivory suit. It's a very beautiful suit. So the title of that piece is The Wedding Dance and Its Dress Code. So it's a way that shows how people are so, skillful and mindful of the little things. We plan and that's how we find joy, I guess, on in planning. And when we see those results come to life, that's when we rejoice. So that's how I move around with my work.